right, we're going to mix it up just a little bit. So I was supposed to come back and talk to you a little bit, but they said I could do anything I wanted to do. So I'm going to flip it all on its head, and I am going to let you choose the conversations that we will have over the next few moments. So, if you have any questions on science and the Bible, creation versus evolution, whether it's astronomy, biology, geology, whatever, throw it at me. Let's see what happens. It doesn't matter what the question is as long as it relates somehow to the Bible and science. Absolutely.
Were there dinosaurs on the ark?
Were there dinosaurs on the ark? Excellent question. Okay, so basically, dinosaurs were created in the beginning. We know that because in the beginning, God created all kinds of animals. If God created every kind of animal in the beginning, that would have included dinosaurs. So, by the time of the flood, which wasn't that long after the creation, yes, there probably would have been dinosaurs around. Dinosaurs would have gone on the ark, or at least some form of dinosaurs, because God brought all the kinds of animals to the ark. But I'll have to tell you, the conditions changed radically after the flood. We're talking about massive, real climate change like you cannot believe. And probably the atmospheric conditions were different. The barometric pressure may have been different. There was not a lot of vegetation. There was not a lot of other animals around at that time. Everything had to start afresh. So probably most dinosaurs went extinct during the flood. And the ones that came off of the ark, whether they might have been small creatures or whatever, those probably went extinct fairly soon after. Yet at the same time, we have all of these medieval legends of knights slaying dragons. There's a temple in Cambodia, a pagan temple in Cambodia, with this stone pillar on it. And this stone pillar, if you look at the representations carved into the stone, there's a man. And then down here, there's a horse. And then down here, there's a goat. And right here, there's a stegosaur. All right, wait a second, a stegosaur? What's going on here? We're talking about 1,000 years ago. People were seeing what appear to be dinosaur-like animals. Now, maybe they just found one in the fossil record. Wait a second, that would have only been bones, right? This was a fully fleshed out stegosaur. So could some smaller dinosaurs have existed longer into the future, even into the medieval time periods, even today, perhaps in the remoteness of the jungles of Africa, or perhaps the Loch Ness Monster is still really out there in the deep. But yes, some form of dinosaur would have gone on the ark because God brought all of the animal kinds, and then God shut the door. He provided the salvation for Noah and all of those animals. And that salvation was one door. He's provided that salvation for us. It's one door, Jesus Christ, Yeshua of Nazareth. All right, yes.
Well, I already know the answer to this question because Genesis Science Network, we watch that and there's fantastic content, but I'll ask this because this is a popular question that atheists will bring up. How did God get two of every species and every, two leopards and two cheetahs and two tigers? And it's impossible. How could all of those animals fit on the ark? So can you speak about that?
It is impossible. I will be the first to admit it. Yes, I admit it. You atheists are right. There is no way to get all of the species, the millions upon millions of species of animals on the ark. And that's not what God said he did. God said he brought 2, sometimes 7, but 2 pairs of every kind of animal. Now, what does kind mean? If you go back to the Hebrew, it basically is mean, okay? So we look at sort of this new study we call baraminology. bara, meaning created, meaning kind. So created kinds. What were the original created kinds? God did not create my blue heeler. God did not create the Chihuahua. God did not create the poodle. God did not create a lot of these breeds that we have today, but God did create dogs in the beginning. And those basic dogs would have gone on the ark, and then those dogs would have speciated. They would have bred into different species of animals that we see today. So it is no problem whatsoever to get all of the basic kinds of animals, especially in a boat that is over 500 feet long. So yes, he did not bring every species, but he did bring every kind. All right, next question. Oh, right here.
Just about young Earth, 24-hour days, creation.
Were the creation days in the beginning 24 hours, and do we have a young Earth? No, actually our Earth is rather old, about 6,000 years old. No, there is a great debate that goes on. How old is the Earth? You see, that question became popular around the time of Charles Darwin, but a bit before. These geologists are studying geology in Scotland and places like that, including Charles Lyell. And what they see is they see all of these animals in these rock layers, and they're like, well, these are dead animals, and these are layers that when I look at this stream near my house, well, this stream erodes away about this much per year. So for those layers to have formed this much per year, and we've got miles of layers, it must have taken billions of years for those layers to form. That's the idea of uniformitarianism, the idea that the present is the key to the past. In other words, if things take a long time currently, well, then they must have taken a long time throughout history. That was thought up by Charles Lyell, who, by the way, in his prefaces of his book, said that his purposes of writing a book saying that those layers must have taken billions of years to form was to free science from Moses, from the Bible. All right, so he had an agenda. Okay, but what we actually find is, I don't know about you, I'm from Tennessee. When we have a flash flood, it'll erode out a highway. It'll create new rivers, basically, in a matter of hours, okay? Erosion, water, all of these things creates immense effect very quickly. It's called catastrophism, okay? So catastrophes like hurricanes and floods and fires and tornadoes and all of these things produce extremely rapid erosional and depositional features, layers and things like that. Well, it seems like, I don't know, there's something around Genesis 6 that talks about this massive catastrophic flood that took place in Earth's history, which would have radically changed the landscape, burying millions of animals within these geological layers and laying down layer after layer very quickly. So therefore, I do believe that the best explanation for the age of the Earth is to say that we have a universe that was created in 6 days, 6 literal days, about 6,000 years ago, and all of these ideas trying to interpret it to be millions or billions of years is simply an attempt to give evolution time to take place. Because guess what? If you were to say, hey, tomorrow you're going to be a turtle, would you believe me? No. Oh, okay, what about in 100 years you'll be a turtle? No. What about that rabbit is going to turn into a giraffe in 300 years? No, you'd be laughed out of the park. So, how do they accomplish it? Oh, over millions and millions of years of evolution, anything is possible. So, I believe that we live in a rather young universe. Yeah. Who was next? I think you were next.
Yeah, so more recently, I heard about archaeological digs being found, and that there was the Sodom and Gomorrah site that was found. Do you know about that, and can you tell us because it was something new to me, and I thought maybe it would be new to other people as well.
There are actually a number of reports of the cities of the plains, Sodom and Gomorrah, that have been discovered recently or reported recently. Actually, quite a few ideas about that. Some of the most recent are looking over on the Jordanian side, where it looks like there are some ruinous areas, which might be the cities of the plains. There, a few years before that, there's been a lot of research to indicate that the cities of the plains might actually be scattered on the Egyptian side or the Israeli side, of the Dead Sea, because the cities of the plains were to be the borders of the Canaanites, okay? Well, to be borders, you kind of have to spread out a little bit. And there are these areas that actually match this potential section of border along the edge of the Dead Sea, and they do contain remains that might be the original cities. So archaeology is you're working with incomplete data, and you're also trying to rebuild history. Archaeology is a science that can be interpreted many different ways. What we have found is that it consistently points us to the validity of Scripture. I've been to Israel about a dozen times. I have participated with the Israeli Antiquities Authority on many, many trips, and I have seen numerous things that point us right back to biblical history, where someone over dinner, we were talking about a tiny cylinder seal, a glass seal that we found in Jerusalem in the middle of a cistern. Now, the cistern, by the way, is at the Garden Tomb. If we all have been to Israel or we know about the Garden Tomb was near the crucifixion site. And this tomb was supposed to have been near a garden. Well, there is a cistern at this garden, and in that cistern, in the walls of the cistern, we found a tiny cylinder seal, like you would seal a document, except this one was a cylinder seal, so you would roll it across wax or clay. It contained an image or a depiction of the pagan moon god, the moon god Sin, the same god worshipped at Haran and Ur of the Chaldees. That's where Abraham came out of, okay? That's where he was supposed to get out of that land, all of those pagan gods. But wait a second, we found it in Jerusalem. What's going on here? That seal dated to the time of King Solomon. Well, what does the Bible tell us about King Solomon? It said his wives turned him after other gods. Okay, so what we find is that not at the time of Abraham, no, at the time of King Solomon, the worship of that God had crept all the way to the holy city itself and was being worshiped there in Jerusalem. So everything we read about the Bible is being affirmed, not confirmed. We don't have to have it confirmed. We know that it's true. We know that God's word is true from the beginning to the end, but it is being affirmed by everything that we see in archaeology and everything we discover when we stick a spade in the ground. Yes.
Genesis 10, the days of Peleg, when the earth was divided. Would you talk about before and after?
Before and after the division. Yeah, well, so there was a division that took place at the time of the flood when the continents were probably broken apart into their current configuration, all right? So when we see the maps in the history books and we see this idea of Pangea or all the continents together, that very well might have been somewhat what it looked like at the time of creation, because you have to remember, what did the Bible say? God said, let the dry land appear. He didn't say let the lands appear. So there may have very well been a large supercontinent that was broken apart during the time of the flood, when the fountains of the great deep broke open and the windows of heaven were opened and tremendous amounts of muds and sands and silts and sediments were washed across the continents in tsunami-like waves, laying those layers of deposition down. But then shortly after the flood, there was a global cooling that we call the Ice Age. All right? So when we read about the Ice Age in our history books, there really was an Ice Age. And it happened right after the flood because there were superheated waters of the oceans. There was a lot of tectonic movement taking place at the time of the flood, a lot of volcanic activity superheating the oceans. All right, what happens when you've got this hot water? Condensation, okay? And that condensation, when you have volcanic aerosols all over the atmosphere blocking the sunlight, it doesn't turn into rain, no, it turns into snow. And that snow caused global cooling where the sea levels began to drop. And land bridges began to appear going to all of these new continents. And what did God command when everybody got off the ark? He said, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, replenish the earth, fill it, okay? So what did the animals do? They did exactly what God told them to do. They went out, they multiplied, they filled the earth, they took advantage of these natural land bridges, and some of them went over to the Americas, and some of them went over to Europe, and some of them went here, and some of them went there, and some of them couldn't quite make it to Australia because that was, the land bridge didn't quite connect, but that was okay because the kangaroos, they just jumped. And but what did we do? Oh no, we knew better. Listen, we just got off of the ark. We're rebuilding civilization. You guys, we've got to stick together, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to all stick together. I don't care what God said. And here's what we're going to do. We're going to build this big tower. This big tower that may reach unto heaven. Now, notice these were bright people. They were brilliant people. They knew that they would never reach the stars. No. What did it say? That we may reach unto heaven. In other words, they were trying to communicate with the heavens. Astrology, okay? And God knew that this was going to be bad because if they all stuck together in that one spot, then that ice age was going to start waning very soon. The continents would start to warm up. The ice would start melting, and the seas would begin to rise again. And we would not be able to make it all over the earth to start to refill the earth. So God did what he had to do. He confounded the languages. He broke men apart because they would not do what he had said. And that division at the Tower of Babel caused some people groups who could speak those same languages to gather and move to certain areas of the world. And there, those traits of those people started to stand out. Those who went to Asia began to develop the same features of their families and the other people in the surrounding areas. Those that went to Africa started to develop different traits and features, but that's the difference between race and mankind. There's only one race. That's the human race. God created us all equal. But certain characteristics started to stand out when the division at the Tower of Babel took place. That would be mine and most of my colleagues' interpretation of the division of Peleg. I think we only have time for one more question. Oh, we've already got a mic right here, so I guess we're going to take that one.
With the Hubble telescope and the other telescopes that are orbiting the Earth, we are seeing pictures of constellation that's hundreds, if not thousands, of light years away from Earth. And my question is twofold. The first question is, how can God be here and there at the same time when it takes us as humans tens of thousands of light years, assuming we could travel? Second part of the question is that it's the light year is based on time, the speed of light. And logically, if God created time, God is not bound by time, but man is. And would the answer to that question be the fact that God is not bound by time?
Yeah, so That's a great question, because God's outside of the universe. He doesn't need the universe in order to operate. He designed and developed the physical laws with which the universe operates, which means that he can, by the way, break them. Those are called miracles, is what we call those. But yes, so he's not bound by that in any sense or form, okay? However, we are. And yet we do see these galaxies, not just thousands of light years away, not just tens of thousands of light years away, millions and billions of light years away. So we might say, well, isn't that a problem? If we believe that God created the earth, let's just say 6,000 years ago, then how in the world can we see light from galaxies and stars that are more than 6,000 light years away? And the answer to that is somewhat complicated but somewhat simple. I'll try to make it brief, but basically light year is a measurement of distance, not time. So a light year does not mean that it is a measurement of a year of light. A light year is the measurement, the distance that light would travel at 12 million miles a minute after a year. Okay, so that's the classical explanation for a light year. But when we realize that light year is a distance, if you change the speed, then you change the time, all right? So let's first tackle this for a second from an atheistic perspective. Let's just say that we believe that 14 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was contracted into a very dense spot, which then rapidly expanded, creating space and time as it went. And that thing's called the Big Bang. All right, let's just say that we believed in that. Well, we've got a problem, and the secularists know it. It's called the horizon problem. You see, not even 14 billion years of universal history is enough time to get light from point A to point B on the other side of the universe, and every astrophysicist knows it. Not at the speed of light. Okay, so how do they solve it? Oh, they come up with this rescuing device. It's a magical principle called inflation, which states that in the first few nanoseconds after the Big Bang, light began to expand so rapidly and space and time started expanding faster than the speed of light, thus stretching everything really, really quickly, which then it magically slowed down to a linear expansion that we see today. All right, so the atheist gets around the problem of starlight and time. They have a starlight and time problem given 14 billion years, but they answer it by saying, oh, well, there was this magical thing that then stretched out everything all of a sudden and then slowed it back down. And nobody knows what caused this magical stretching or magical slowing. It seems to me that they have actually invented a supernatural principle. Supernatural meaning it does not follow natural laws, meaning it is not really science, is it? A supernatural principle to explain the starlight and time dilemma, all right? So if they've got a problem with 14 billion years of universal history still not being enough time, we admit that we also, as Christians, have a problem with believing that God created the universe thousands of years ago, all right? But not really. So I have a friend, Dr. Russell Humphreys. He has a PhD in physics, and he reminds us it's something called gravitational time dilation, all right? He reminds us that according to Einstein's theories of relativity, gravity affects time. That's right. So the farther out in a gravitational well you are, the faster time is ticking. Well, if we're anywhere near the center of the universe, I'm not saying perfectly center of the universe, if we're anywhere near the center of the universe, which we're in a favored position, I believe, so it's not hard to imagine that we're somewhere near the center of the universe, well then, the farther out in the universe you go, the faster time ticks, which is documented in science. We can measure atomic clocks at sea level, on the mountains, and in the International Space Station, and they all tick at different rates. Gravity affects time. So we know this. That might help us explain how way out in the universe, time is ticking at a faster rate, allowing that starlight to reach us. If that doesn't, I have another friend, Dr. Danny Faulkner. He wrote the foreword to my first book, Wonders Without Number. He's got a PhD in astronomy, and he points out that there's a Hebrew word used in the book of Genesis called dasha. It means a rapid maturing or a rapid growing. Okay, let the earth bring forth green things. Let the earth bring forth this. Let the earth bring forth that. Dasha, a rapid maturing. So why wouldn't he have done the same thing on day 4 when he created the sun, moon, and the stars? Why wouldn't he have rapidly stretched it out, including the starlight? And in fact, there are over 16 verses scattered throughout the Bible that speak of God stretching the heavens like a curtain, something that Einstein thought that he discovered in his day was actually predated by thousands of years in the Bible. All right, so if the universe was rapidly stretched, well, then there's the starlight being rapidly stretched to us. And if that doesn't float your boat, I have another friend who has his PhD in astrophysics from the University of Boulder, Colorado, and he proposes something called anisotropic light synchrony convention. That's right. Now, can I move on? Yeah. Anisotropic light synchrony convention is a big term which means that it is possible starlight does not move at the same speed from point A to point B as it does from point B to point A. Nobody has ever measured the one-way speed of light, ever. It is impossible to do. Physics will not allow it. We can shoot a laser off towards the end of a mirror at the end of a hall, and then that laser bounces off the mirror, comes back to us, and we stop the stopwatch, and we record it. That's the two-way speed of light. We divide it by 2, and that's the one-way. No, it's not the one-way speed of light, is it? That's the two-way speed of light divided by 2. What if it only took an instant to get there, and it took longer getting back? Or what if it took a long time to get to the end of the hall and only an instant coming back? There's no way to prove it one way or the other. So God has done some remarkable things, just like we talked about earlier in the day, wonders without number and great things past finding out. According to Einstein's theories of relativity, there is no way to know. It is one of those great things past finding out. There's no way to know the one-way speed of light. And if there's no way to know the one-way speed of light, then we actually have no idea how long it takes. It could be instantaneous for the light from those distant galaxies to reach us. That's the short version of the starlight and time dilemma. Long story short, we have no problem explaining this from a biblical standpoint. From a Christian standpoint, we can stand strong on the Word of God. We have got science on our side. It's pointing us all the time back to our Creator, back to our grand designer. And all atheism has is supernatural principles that break the laws of science to try to tell you how this universe came to be from nothing. It doesn't happen. And I'm afraid I'm out of time. Thank y'all so much.